Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Open Peace podcast. We are joined by Natan, who is an American currently living in India. Natan, welcome onto the show. It's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Amir.
No problem, no problem at all. So on this podcast, it's going to be a little bit different to the usual ones. We're going to be talking a little bit about the war on drugs and drug policy in different countries and what kind of different governments are doing to deal with the issue of drugs and addiction. It's a topic that is very close to my heart. I've had friends who have unfortunately dealt with all sorts of different issues, and as I've traveled around the world and got to see different countries, unfortunately it seems to be a revolving problem from place to place. What's your experience with the war on drugs and addiction in general?
So the neighborhood that I grew up in, is the East Village / Lower East Side of Manhattan, New York City.
Hmm.
And in the 90s, and even still to this day, it was very much known as a heroin hotspot. Specifically, the block that I grew up on, there's still currently a methadone clinic around the corner from my parents' apartment. So I grew up at a very young age, seeing people with needles in their arms in the park, uh, seeing homeless people with clear drug addictions, and seeing people who are undergoing treatment for methadone, sort of nodding off in the street. As well, I personally used other drugs. I was a little bit turned off by the visual presentation of opiate addiction, so I never really got into that. But certainly
Sure.
alcohol, uh, mushrooms, psychedelics,
Hmm.
um, and marijuana, and even cocaine from time to time, in my younger days, were common in my life.
Hmm.
So I'm also currently studying personally to become a consultant in indoor legal marijuana growing. So I'm very invested in the legal shift that's going on right now and over the past few decades across the world regarding various drugs, preferably uh, and specifically with marijuana. But I think that it's very important that that shift continues across the whole world.
Sure, sure. I really agree with you on that. And I also think that it would be way more beneficial for societies and countries in general to deal with the problem of addiction and mental health problems by actually treating and harm reduction to the people that unfortunately are plagued by some of these things. uh, I was wondering, you were talking about heroin and what you saw growing up in Manhattan. Now, that's very common for most cities across the world, unfortunately. London, Sydney, many other big metropolises in America. It's a very, very sad state of affairs that these people are not given any help. And it's kind of seen like, you're doing it to yourself type of thing. It's your own problem. It's not a societal problem. It's your problem. We see things with like legal drugs that there's more help out there, right? Like with alcohol and with tobaccos, with smoking. There are many, many treatments. There's Alcoholics Anonymous. There's many places that you can go to try and find a little bit of help. I think it would be great if people that did have these problems with really hardcore opiates had that help. I did also want to talk to you about the opioid crisis in America that we're seeing, which is actually from legal prescription drugs. In the last decade or so, we've seen it kind of skyrocket, and overdoses have become a huge issue over there. Is there anything people outside of America don't understand about the problem over there? Are people being given these things kind of willy-nilly and just, being handed them out like candy? And why is there such a crisis over there with these kind of things?
Well, certainly the reporting would indicate that there's a problem um, with kickbacks from doctors handing out prescriptions at a higher rate than they normally would. Simultaneously, it's there's also some of it coming from just people sort of nicking a small amount of a shipment and saying that it fell and broke. There's all sorts of ways that these legal opiates end up in illicit trade, and as well now we're starting to see the fentanyl problem becoming very serious, and that's simultaneously legal and illegally procured. Some of it's coming from Mexico, some of it's coming from China, and some of it's coming from doctors as well. Fentanyl is prescribed and used in medical settings. So there's certainly multiple avenues in which it's being introduced into circulation.
And just so people are aware, this thing is like, I can't remember exactly, is it times 50 as strong as heroin? It's like super strong, and people are ODing en masse with it, right?
Yeah, I believe it's measured. I don't know if it's measured in the tens or hundreds of micrograms, but it's a very, very, very potent by weight substance. So people are, you can accidentally be using far much more than intended, especially when it's being used to adulterate, to mix in with other drugs. So there's even instances of people thinking that they're doing Xanax or thinking that they're doing ecstasy, and really, or even cocaine, which you would imagine wouldn't make sense to mix an opiate into a stimulant, but it does happen, and people do overdose from that.
Very sad. Very, very sad to hear that. And I do think that countries need to be rethinking also the kind of, not just the policy on how to deal with addiction and addicts and crime in general with this illegal black market of fentanyl and things like that are raging, but also to kind of really think about the humanistic values. If you have a friend in need, let's say he's got alcoholism, most people would say, I want to be there for that friend and make sure he gets the help that he needs to cut his alcohol intake, whether it be to go cold turkey, whether it be some form of rehabilitation, and you want to look out for that person. So why are we not doing that on a larger scale in society? And I wanted to mention to you, Nathan, kind of, and talk to you a little bit about what the Portuguese did and the Portuguese model to drug policy and what they've done over there. So for those that aren't aware, Portugal have decriminalized, I think it's all drugs pretty much. And what they actually saw, that by doing that, not just that, but they also made sure that people that were using drugs and that were caught, that they were actually given help by the medical teams over there. So let's say someone was caught with, I don't know, say 70 grams of heroin, they would be arrested because it's illegal to have it over a certain amount. Simple users won't be arrested. That's the way they deal with it over there. And then that person will then be referred to a drug rehabilitation center and will be given all the kind of tools that he needs to try and fix his life or her life and try to get back on a better path. And I think it's a model that has actually been proven to work, in the sense that the use of hard drugs like heroin actually went down, and even use of other chemicals and drugs went down when they introduced this. It's not that they decriminalized and everyone just started using things. No, because most people don't actually want to, start shooting up heroin. So do you think, Natan, that if other countries followed that model, that we could see harm reduction?
I definitely think so. I think that decriminalization is an absolutely necessary first step, and legalization and regulation, um, especially for these chemical drugs that are very small dosage. These things can be very dangerous, and the only way that you can ensure that it's safe, even if it's ultimately
Mhm.
undesirable that people are habitually using these substances, the only way that you can ensure safety is through regulations, either by governments or self-imposed by quality assurance via the corporate route. Um, yeah, I also heard that Oregon is decriminalizing drugs as well. And Oregon is one of
Mhm.
the main ports in the United States for heroin coming
That's right.
across the Pacific.
Yeah.
Yeah, Oregon
Mhm.
and Washington. Um, and I think that's a good step. They've also legalized, I believe, fully legalized mushrooms, um, which is another sort of the other end, the other spectrum of what people consider drugs. It can be, it's kind of the opposite of an addictive substance. So you can still technically form a habit around it, similar to drinking mint tea, but a
Mhm.
little bit more extreme. Uh,
Yeah, for
and
sure, for sure.
there's
There's a
a lot
few
of
effects
benefits
there
that
that
are being
differ. There's a few effects that differ there, for
right,
sure.
right. A few noticeable differences between
Yeah,
mushroom
yeah.
tea and peppermint tea, but there are quite a few beneficial effects that are being studied by various institutions such as universities and less so corporations for those,
Mm.
um, but I think there is a market in there for that as well.
For
Um,
sure, for sure. And I think, yeah, we haven't actually explored the kind of beneficial effects of a lot of these substances that were made illegal in the past, like magic mushrooms, like MDMA, or the street name Molly, as people call it, which someone has actually put in the chat here. I believe he's Canadian. Bobby K has said that Molly is a big issue over here, and that is sad. That's become an issue, because I know that there's studies going on over here in Israel that people with PTSD, very strong PTSD, that have seen really horrific things and that have been in battles and whatnot, they take very, very small amounts of it, and it can lead to them really, in just a few sessions, completely getting over the PTSD and really helping them with their life. And there's also research, we're talking about mushrooms. There's a lot of research going in that it really, really helps with addiction, funnily enough, that people that are addicted to either cigarettes, alcohol, other substances, illegal substances, opioids as well, that they do a few sessions or even one session of mushrooms, and we don't exactly know how it works and what's going on in the brain, but it helps these people just completely, set off on a new life without addiction, which is really incredible. And we need to look into how that works and what's the mechanism behind it. Recently over here, there was a study that 1 in 7 Israelis, so that's nearly 2 million people over here in Israel, a little bit less than 2 million people have an addiction. And I'm sure that in other countries, the numbers are probably very, very similar. So it's a huge thing that we really kind of need to change our attitude towards. And I think it's going to be people like yourself, Nathan, who are thinking freely, who want to make a change. You're trying to get into the legal marijuana business, which is obviously going to be huge, not just in the States, but other countries. Recently, Thailand have legalized. Over here, we have medicinal cannabis. I think Germany are about to as well decriminalize completely, and I think it's going to be a domino effect. So, in your eyes, what are the other things that kind of people can do to raise awareness on these subjects, and what can be done on the kind of wider scale to make people more aware and to help these people that are suffering with serious addiction?
I think one of the biggest things that people can do as individuals to help each other, whether there's addiction around them or not, is to practice empathy. Because the reasons for that people will start using a drug isn't always as a coping mechanism, but the reasons that they will continue to use a drug and to form a destructive habit that's ruining their lives is almost always as a coping mechanism. So practicing empathy for those people, doing your best to help them get away from the situations that they're in, it is a really great one. I used to have, growing up in the East Village and the Lower East Side, I did have friends who became addicted to heroin, and there was a program nearby run at an institution called the Yippee Cafe. You can look it up. Unfortunately, it's now defunct, but they, I believe, were the only place in the United States where you could do what was called ibogaine therapy.
I've heard of it. Yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah. It's another one of these. I believe it's a tryptamine-based hallucinogen that has shown in anecdotal case studies to counteract addictive the addictive functions within the brain. I'm not saying necessarily to go out and get your friend mushrooms or LSD if they're struggling with addiction, but part of the value of these experiences is that it's novel. It's taking you out of the cycle of waking up with a headache and needing to get that fix. So providing novel experiences for friends suffering with addiction can be very helpful. But ultimately, the most helpful is empathy. Is empathy and friendship, and not turning away from them, however hard it may be, because people under addiction will sometimes do horrible things, steal, lie, in order to supply themselves. So it's a struggle.
It's a domino effect, isn't it? It's a domino effect. And whereas if they have an outlet where they could legally access the things that they need, whether that be a replacement like methadone with heroin, whether that be the counseling, whether that be the rehabilitation, whether that be, maybe a face-to-face with a psychiatrist, with doctors, with mental health experts that can then, get them on a route to away from addiction. I struggled with cigarettes. I was addicted to cigarettes for years. I used to smoke, I would say sometimes even over a pack a day. The first thing I would do in the morning is have a cigarette. And these things, even though they're legal, they're lethal. They're not good for you at all. And I guess, in the sense that I managed to kick it, it made me feel good. It made me feel strong. Like, okay, I can get over this. But I'm sure, and obviously you see people still smoking into their 60s and 70s and, still carrying on that addiction. Not everyone can kick it by themselves. And, you mentioned empathy. Empathy is a huge thing. If people around you are empathetic to the fact that you have an addiction, that you're going through something, that you're suffering, if we all got around those people and helped them out, I think we would see a huge reduction in these cases. And I think there'd also be a knock-on effect. Whereas you said that, you know, there's a knock-on effect to it being illegal and street crime and robberies and thefts. I think all these things would go down, and also healthcare. You know, we wouldn't need to deal with so many incidents of things happening to people, because if we're focusing on harm reduction, we would actually see a huge benefit to people's overall health around the world, which would be fantastic. I know there's obviously a huge crisis at the moment in the States with obesity, diabetes, these kind of things, adding on to all the addiction issues that people are dealing with over there, and the opioid crisis. So yeah, I think that's really great words from you there, Nathan. I did want to ask you a little bit about the actual war on drugs that Nixon kind of started, you know, with the whole Just Say No campaign, and the kind of brainwashing that was done to society over there, and the impact that it had, not only in America with the likes of the DEA and the FBI, and, you know, all the kind of activities and money that was funded into the war on drugs within America, but also outside of America, in Latin America, in places like Honduras, Guatemala, Colombia, and others in South and Latin America. We saw, you know, huge amount of carnage, of death, of killing, because of these things. Whereas if they were legal, and what we were talking about, focusing on harm reduction and it being treated as a health problem, we wouldn't, there would be no need for any of that, would there?
That's right. That's right. And it's interesting that you bring up the war on drugs and the Just Say No campaign, which I believe was headed by Nancy Reagan.
Oh, Reagan. I'm getting confused. I always get
And
those two confused. Sorry. Yeah, Reagan.
right. Well, you're correct, though, that the drug war began sort of in earnest with Nixon, with I believe that's when the Scheduling Act that created this sort of Schedule 1, Schedule 2, Schedule 3 classifications, you know, including marijuana with drugs like heroin, on Schedule 1, which is a classification that says that there's no medical benefit. But at the time of Nancy Reagan in the early 80s, the CIA and the United States government were clandestinely trading large amounts of guns to anti-communist guerrilla groups in South and Central America in return for cocaine, for already, you know, extracted and purified cocaine, which then they turned around and it was later revealed were selling in LA through, I believe the gentleman's street name is Freeway Ricky Ross, and I think the
I'm aware.
journalist who revealed all of this is James Webb. I might be mistaken on that. But in a lot of ways, the illegality of these drugs creates a market that can be actually several markets that can be manipulated off the books without the legality of cocaine and the cocaine and crack trade. A lot of anti-communist governments in South America and Central America would have possibly survived the 80s. So it's very interesting. And then at the same time, there with the illegality of it, the quality control goes down, and a considerable portion of overdoses are due to quality control that
Mhm.
would be avoidable if a corporation could be held accountable and sued for such for such impurities.
I completely agree. When the kind of ecstasy and MDMA hopped on the scene in the UK, it became a huge party drug, and people were taking it all over the country. And unfortunately, people were overdosing on these things because they had no idea what was in it. They would take more to try and get more high, if you like, get more messed up. And these are not people who wanted to die. These aren't people who are close to committing suicide or anything like that. These are people who are trying to find an escape from the whatever is actually going on in their life. And because the illegality of it, they are meeting their end. Unfortunately, there was recently a case in England of somebody in their early 30s taking something recreational and passing away. And I really do think it's a huge tragedy. And in the UK as well, unfortunately, the way drug policy works over there is that there's like A, B, and C class drugs. And cannabis was actually, it used to be a C class, and then it was bumped back up to B. So people, are being arrested and put in jail for the sale of it. Um, and the kind of other substances and street substances that are around lead to, like you were saying in America with in the 80s and Rick Ross and all these kind of things, it leads to gangs controlling the drug trade, which is what happens in the UK. And then unfortunately that spills over into stabbings, into attacks, into like gang warfare that goes on in cities up and down the country. And unfortunately, so many kids have got mixed up in this and gotten really hurt or killed, and it's a revolving circle. It's a revolving circle of violence that I've witnessed since I was very young, and it never changes. Every week, every couple of weeks, you're seeing a youngster get stabbed to death over nothing. Really over drug feuds, over debts, over. And I really think that governments need to take responsibility and change the future, because with the increase in population, you're only going to see more and more crazy events going on. And I've got family in the UK, I've got family in London, and I don't want my nieces growing up around that. I don't want them having to be scared because there was a stabbing down their street, or anything like that, or that there's gangs that control certain parts of London. So I really would like to see a change. I don't know about you, Nathan, but do you think it's possible that in our lifetime we will see these changes happen? Are we witnessing it already with certain countries and certain places?
I mean, absolutely. Like I said, I'm from New York, and just recently they've fully legalized marijuana for personal consumption, growing, and cultivation. Um, and I've already got in my storage closet back in Manhattan a grow tent and grow lights, just waiting for me for when I return.
Hmm.
Um, and also internationally, like for example, the state that I live in India, Tamil Nadu, it used to have a total ban on alcohol, and that was until I believe 2005. And what what was going on is exactly what you would expect. There were gangs brewing moonshine with bananas and
Hmm.
other fruits,
Hmm.
and people were going blind due to a lack of quality control. They were getting they were accidentally brewing the wrong kind of alcohol, or people were going blind from drinking rubbing alcohol because their supply was no longer sustainable, and they were making rash decisions from that. Unfortunately, the ban had lasted long enough that networks of criminality had been formed, and those criminals simply moved to other markets of criminality. So India has, due to its proximity to Afghanistan and northern Pakistan, there's a lot of heroin addiction. I was taking a walk on the beach with my wife just last week, and I saw multiple needles strewn out on the beach. But with the access of legal alcohol in the state, the amount of heroin use did go down. So there's absolutely hope for it. One of the ways that I think it can be positively or framed in an effective way in a lot of countries in the East is that this drug prohibition is mostly a relic of colonialism, which is true. It was a relic of British colonialism to have a ban on all these drugs, and likewise currently, I believe the United States pretty heavily leans on countries to have prohibition on things like cannabis and poppy production and all of that, and pushing it into the gutter and into the dark like that basically just puts it into the hands of people with illicit intentions who are willing to take those risks and willing to be a lot less wholesome than a company that has to maintain a public image or a Twitter account and a Facebook account with public likes. There's no court of public opinion regarding a gang, unfortunately.
Yeah. It's just we're kind of seeing the same thing that happened with prohibition in America in the early 1900s. The gangs took over, the moonshine took over, the illegal booze took over, the deaths increased. It was just a real
and the adulterants increased. There was a large market, because if you're trafficking in beer, which requires a pint or two to get a buzz, versus whiskey, which requires maybe 400 milliliters to get a buzz, you're losing money. So people, likewise, if you're able to add an adulterant to those 400 milliliters, make it so that it provides the same effect or similar effect with 200, you're making more money because you can carry less of an individual item. That's the same reasoning behind using fentanyl in and using it to adulterate what would normally just be heroin or Molly or cocaine. Likewise, in the United States, there was a problem of a lot of hash oil vape pen cartridges that were mostly, I believe it was vitamin E oil, some sort of oil that provided a similar experience when smoked, but it was actually quite bad for your lungs to be using, whereas the normal, purely hash oil extract would be a lot less damaging. So it just provides incentive when these substances are illegal for tricky behavior on behalf of unaccountable, faceless entities.
Exactly. exactly. You've hit the nail on the head there. Unaccountable, faceless entities is a very good way to put it. I do want to bring up a comment here from Bobby K, who is actually Indian, and I think you'll be able to tell us a little bit about this. Bobby K saying it's not just a supply issue, but a cost issue. Much cheaper to try and make your own. Being Indian, I can tell you several stories of people getting permanent health issues from desi, moonshine, and street drugs, which is very very true,
Yeah.
very very true, and it's sad. It's sad because it's really affecting people all over the globe, as we're kind of seeing in this discussion. It's not just India, it's not just the UK, it's not just America, it's everywhere. It's Latin America. I also know that there's a huge heroin problem in Iran, which people don't realize, that there's a huge percentage of people addicted to heroin over there. Australia, when I was living in Sydney, I saw people shooting up in the capital of Australia. It was really a sad sight for me to see. And kind of each country has its own kind of specific issues, but we really do, I think, in the Western world, countries like America, the UK, places in Europe need to take a lead on it, and hopefully other people will follow in kind by training more mental health professionals, getting people more help that they need, seeing doctors, understanding the issues behind addiction. And I think we really could move forward by making these changes. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about, Nathan, about the issue we've kind of seen in the Philippines. If you're aware of, he's not president anymore, I don't believe, but Duterte, I can't really say his name. I don't know how you pronounce it.
Duterte, yeah.
Duterte. He waged a war on drugs over there, where I believe that he was just basically sending in the police as assassination squads and just killing users, dealers, and just horrific things. And for me, it doesn't matter that that's somebody who's addicted to something, or even somebody who was selling something. To go and kill someone because of that seems to me absolutely absurd, hideous, vile, and actually evil. What do we do about places like the Philippines where we see such violent acts being taken against innocent civilians?
I mean, yeah, that's a very, very tough and grave consideration, the situation in the Philippines, for sure. Um, I think it's another perfect argument for legalization. A lot of people who are selling drugs are not, they don't want to be selling drugs. They would probably prefer to have a little bit more of a guaranteed job where they're working, 9 to 5 or 10 to 6, getting a salary. Uh, Selling drugs uh, is not a fun, safe, or comfortable job to have, because you don't really know if you're going to make enough money to feed your kids, to pay your rent, to
Mm-hmm.
to buy dog or cat food. There's all sorts of unknowns in that in taking part of that business. And yeah, I'm very glad for my friends in the Philippines. I have a few that they're no longer you know at in danger of being murdered simply for having an unfortunate drug habit,
Mm-hmm.
or even a single use. You can
Yeah.
just get caught in the wrong place in the wrong time when when such things are going on. It's very dire what was going on, and even I recall Duterte even admitting to personally going out with a small group of police himself and participating in extrajudicial killings himself.
Yeah.
So it's
Insane. insane.
The political situation in the Philippines is certainly ripe for change, and I think that
100%.
is coming.
100%. And but do you think, like, what can we do globally to tackle like rogue leaders like that are doing that? Like, we need to revoke their passports, they can't travel, we need to make them pariahs. We need to put pressure on NGOs and organizations and charities to get into that country and help these people that are dealing with these issues. Are there things that we can do on a wider level as well?
I think spreading awareness when it comes to democracies or flawed democracies in this case is probably the best thing, because the populace can eventually speak their mind and have these people removed from power. When it comes to countries with less freedom for their populations, unfortunately, more undemocratic methods like sanctioning them and their family can have beneficial effects. A lot of the leaders of countries have their children in places like Switzerland or in the United States even. So it's in the case of Switzerland, it's hard to actually touch them. But in the United States, you can have an effect by calling your congressperson, voicing your opinion. An individual won't necessarily change the opinion or the priorities of a congressperson, but if there is enough public support for such thing, public outcry against such behaviors, then there can be a case where you get the attention of your representative. Absolutely.
That's good to know. That's good to know that there's things that you can be doing to tackle these things, because I've seen these issues, like I said, all over the world. In Israel here, unfortunately, we have issues with this as well. We're not immune to it. There's a huge homeless problem in Tel Aviv, and unfortunately, it's not that these people want to be homeless, it's the fact that they don't have the help that they need to get off the streets, and that 9 times out of 10 coincides with addiction problems. So I really do think that it's going to take world leaders, places like America, the UK, Western Europe, to really kind of pave the way forward in terms of drug policy, in terms of treatment, in terms of harm reduction, and really use all the tools that you have in your arsenal. So if we see that, like, illegal drugs, like magic mushrooms that we were talking about earlier, can help people with addiction, we should be using that tool that's in our arsenal. If there are other ways of dealing with addiction, whether that be, with cigarettes, people use nicotine patches, chewing gum, whatever it may be, whether it be seeing a psychologist, a psychiatrist, medical professionals, we need to use all the tools that we have at hand to deal with these crises. And I really do believe that there'll be a domino effect, and you will see society improving as these things, develop. If we dealt with, let's just take alcoholism and let's say drunken behavior, we call it disorderly behavior in the UK, drunken disorderly, we would see a huge reduction in cases of A&E, accidents that happen, accident and emergency. The hospitals will be able to actually deal with people that are in desperate need of serious treatment, instead of somebody who got drunk and got in a fight, or somebody that got drunk and fell over, and these types of things. And we would also see a huge reduction in crime and violent crime. And I really do think there'll be a huge domino effect if we tackle these things. I also think, Nathan, and I wanted to focus on this as well, is something called responsible use. So I've spoken here about alcohol and drunkenness. I like a drink every now and again. I'm not gonna lie. I like a beer every now and again. I like a little glass of whiskey, and I don't mind even a nice little glass of red wine every now and again. But that does not mean that I'm sitting at home getting completely off my face drunk, you know? But unfortunately, certain cultures kind of push that way of use onto people, you know, whether that be in America, whether that be in the UK, Ireland, other European countries. People are encouraged to drink to the maximum, to push their limits instead of responsible use. How do you think we can raise awareness and encourage people that if they are going to use, whether it be alcohol or whether it be other things, to use responsibly?
Well, first of all, that can only be achieved through through the drug itself being socially acceptable. And the first step of
Mm,
that is for it to be legally acceptable. Um, the moment that you make something illegal, there's already a, oh, I you know I don't want to explain how to safely use cocaine or ecstasy because it's illegal. I'm endorsing an illegal behavior. Likewise with marijuana or heroin. So legalization and decriminalization is the first step in that. Um, and and one of the benefits of having a healthy social association with certain drug use or with drug use in general is that it takes away the illicit nature or the dangerous nature that draws many young adults and teens into drug use. So I've been I used to be more accurately a hippie and going
mm,
to gatherings like the Rainbow Gathering, which is it's kind of like Burning Man minus the
mhm,
electricity and minus the tech bros, and there's no cost of entry. It's more like a camping experience in a national forest. And in that community, in those gatherings, you have people smoking marijuana uh, and doing mushrooms, it just out in the open. And
mhm,
in those scenarios, I've met children who grew up in those communities, and their association with weed and with marijuana, with mushrooms is like, oh yeah, that's just something that the adults do. you know not that it's
mhm.
something that I was told is bad, not something that I was told to avoid and stay away from, and only the sneaky fancy cool people do it. It loses its allure for a lot of people.
Yeah,
And a lot
definitely.
of those people that I know who grew up in those situations, they have a much healthier relationship with those substances and with pretty much all substances that I've seen. None of those people that I knew who grew up in those communities grew up to be heroin addicts. But
Mhm,
some of the people that I knew growing up in the Lower East Side, in the East Village, they did. They did.
mhm.
And it's not for lack of availability of opium or prescription pills in places like the Rainbow Gathering either. It's there. All the drugs that you can imagine are at these places. It's just that it's done in a more open way, so people can have an educated understanding of how the use of those drugs really looks, and
Mhm,
how likewise somebody whose father drinks, or father and mother, or just father or mother drink, they'll have an understanding of the difference between drunk dad and sober dad.
yeah.
And myself, my parents didn't drink, so it was very easy for me um, to enter into a drinking culture without as much understanding of it, even though it's quite common socially in America to drink, you know. So I've experienced sort of a reverse of that.
I see. I see. That's very interesting. So it's very similar to like what you're saying is that if people are using in more of a safe environment, an open environment, it's similar to like going to the pub and your friend getting too drunk. He's had one more pint than he should have. Oh, come on, Tom. Let's get you home. Let's get you in a taxi home before, there's trouble.
Yeah.
So obviously different substances and they cause different things and there's different effects, but it will be way more easy to deal with the problem, whereas people are using in dingy corners and hiding out and overdosing at home because of laced drugs or not being aware enough of what's in the actual thing that they've bought. I did want to bring up a comment here by K-Man and hear your thoughts on it. Very interesting for me to see this one. And thank you very much, K-Man, for bringing this up. He says, I used to be a heroin addict, and you will be surprised how hard it is to get on something like methadone or Suboxone. Most doctors only accept cash payments and don't accept insurance. Can you tell us about that?
Right. So in the United States, at least in New York, I know that insurance pays out either quarterly or at the end of the year. So some doctors are very reluctant to accept insurance because insurance companies are very litigious and very stingy with their payments. So they could an insurance company, and this has happened to me and my parents. An insurance company has, in the moment, at the receptionist's desk, at a when they do a cursory check of your insurance and get approval, it's just that, a cursory approval, and the insurance company can then say, "Oh, well, was this actually necessary?" So this is an unfortunate aspect of the for-profit insurance industry, that many doctors, for their own safety, for their own financial safety, choose to reject either one insurance company over another, or in some cases all insurance companies. It is a very unfortunate truth in the United States that's the state of insurance as it is now. I do hope for a shift in insurance policy and in the structure of insurance, but it's very challenging once you let once a market is created and a structure is created to deconstruct that, because there's money in it. There's so much money in it.
That's the problem.
Yeah. So likewise, when it comes to legalization, sometimes it's because if you're really making a lot of money doing trading illicit drugs, you're going to have to find a way to legitimize that cash. And so a lot of very big name drug dealers are either real estate or restaurant, or so they have some cover organization that they can even use those funds and those profits from drug trade to lobby against drug legalization, because it would specifically cut into their market,
the margins.
So in some cases we're actually at the mercy of drug dealers, of large scale drug dealers, and their willingness to transfer their business, their market, or their business plan into a legal format. Because some of them do choose to do that. They do choose to, they see the shift. For example, in California, in the legal marijuana industry, many people saw the shift. They knew it was coming, so they got themselves prepared. They applied for the commercial grow operation permits and all of that. And ultimately, we have to sort of ask nicely that these other people in other markets do the same thing.
It's a complex one, isn't it? It's you're gonna be impacting people's profit margins, and you're gonna see battles, and you're gonna see kind of a lot of underhanded things going on. But I guess if it's part of the process of getting things legalized, of treating drug addiction as a health problem, of increasing mental health awareness, and making sure that people with these issues get to see professionals that can help them, and also being around, like you said, friends and family who are empathetic to their needs, we can really help kind of that transition. I did want to talk to you a little bit about the state of Colorado, because I do believe Colorado have they decriminalized everything, or is it just a few substances, or how are things
I
working?
know marijuana is recreationally legal. I'm
Right.
not sure. I can quickly Google Colorado decriminalization or Colorado drug legalization.
Oh, sorry, Nathan. I think it just cut out there for a second. I didn't hear what you said.
I said I'm actually not so familiar with if there's new legislation from Colorado. I know that weed is recreationally legal. Um, so yeah, in 2020, it appears that Colorado uh, defelonized Schedule 1 and Schedule 2 drugs. Schedule 3 drugs are already
Interesting.
non-felonies unless you exceeded or committed some other crime in conjunction with possession of them. Um, so I think that's a great step, and I hope that New York follows suit. I'm a little jealous and feel a sense of healthy competition against states like Colorado and and California and Oregon and even countries like Canada and Portugal in that sense, because we Americans we believe in our exceptionalism, and we want to be the first at everything, even if we are not all agreeing what we should be
Yeah.
the first at.
Yeah, yeah. And right, freedom, liberty, these are huge values that the Americans hold, and it doesn't seem like the drug policy is very free, and
Right, there's a
that's something.
disconnect in that
There's a
sense.
disconnect. There is a big disconnect there. Nathan, I'm sure we could continue this discussion for hours, and we could delve into many more topics. So I would like to invite you back on next time. You want to come back on. It'll be a pleasure to have you back on, and we can maybe discuss certain other topics with regards to drug policy, the war on drugs, what can be done to stop it, what can be done to stop the destruction, the death, the addiction that is causing so much pain to millions of people out there. It's been an absolute pleasure to host you tonight, but I know you do have to go.
Yes.
You're a very busy man over there. I'd like to wish you well over there in India, and enjoy it while you're over there. I happen to be a huge fan of the country and also the food. Indian food is for me, it's the best. It's incredible. So you're in for a culinary treat while you're over there. Enjoy it, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Thank you, Amir, and I'd be delighted to come back and discuss this topic again.
sure. It'll be great to have you back, and maybe we can bring in some of the other members of the team. I know Abood really wanted to be here tonight, but he's getting married soon, so he's very busy with the preparations for the wedding and everything. So maybe next time we can get you on with Abood, who I know also, feels
That
passionately
would be
about these.
delightful.
For
And
sure.
Mazel Tov Abood.
Yeah, I'll send that on to him. Hopefully he sees this, and he'll get that message. He'll really enjoy that.
That's right.
So
That's right.
just again, thank you so much, Natan. And for all the viewers out there, it would really, really be great if you could tell us what you think about these things. Comment in the comment section down below. And, also if you're not subscribed, please hit that button. Send your friends a link to the podcast. It really does help us grow, get our message out there. We're really just trying to promote a more peaceful world, whether that be regarding wars that are raging all over, whether that be the war on drugs, whether it be what's going on in Russia, Ukraine, over here in the Holy Land, Africa. We really do want to see progression, because unfortunately people have been suffering for way too long with these issues. And with modernity, with the technology that we have, with the connection that we can have, it's amazing that we're just even here sitting together, Natan, in different countries, different continents, and managing to connect and converse. So imagine what we can all do together if we're pushing in the right direction.
Very true. Very true. Amen.
Cheers, Natan. Cheers, Natan. It's been a real pleasure, and hopefully we'll see you again on the pod soon. And to everyone listening, thank you for joining us tonight, and wishing everyone a nice weekend. Bye-bye.